Good evening and welcome everybody to this 100 years event where we're going to be premiering the videos of Leena Savjani, a partner here at Irwin Mitchell, Marcia Longdon, a partner at Kingsley, Napley, and Christina, a barrister at Goldsmith Chambers. I'm Alison Eddy. I'm the managing partner of the London office of Irwin Mitchell. I'm also a medical negligence partner. And when Denis-Smith, the amazing Dana, founder of 100 Years, first 100 years and now next 100 years, first approached me about sponsoring a video series highlighting women from minority backgrounds, I jumped at the chance to be able to do that because I love the 100 Years project. I love its positivity. It's so joyful, the way that it celebrates the achievements of women. So really, really pleased to be able to sponsor this video series. And I think the reality is that, you know, in the legal profession, we've come a long way. Obviously, there's still more to do. But I think, you know, we've come a long way over the last 30 years. When I joined the profession over 30 years ago, only 8.1% of the profession was female, and there were very few female role models, something that we'll be talking about later this evening. But now at Irwin Mitchell, over 50% of our partners are women, and it's the same, you know, across many law firms where there's an increasing number of women coming through, progressing through firms and into partnership roles. And, you know, women clearly like going into law. Law appeals to women. Women clearly like working here. They like our flexible by choice model, which means that they can work when it suits them at home, and as well as obviously still coming into the office if they want to work in a hybrid way. Having said all of that, of course, there is far more that we need to be doing to be attracting women from minority groups into the profession. We all recognise that. So hearing stories from amazing women like Leena, Christina, Marcia tonight, the hope is that that will inspire women coming into the profession to make their dreams a reality. So Dana, I'm going to hand over to you to start showing the videos and having a fireside chat with our panelists this evening.
Thank you so much, Alison, and thank you for supporting us. Of course, none of these films could have come to light without this support from Irwin Mitchell, so we're really, really grateful for your help. We will start with Leena's film. She's a partner, as you heard from Alison, at Irwin Mitchell, and she specializes in medical negligence claims, an area in which she specialized from the very outset. So this is her specialism and has been exclusively her area from the very start. She was also one of the winners at last year's Inspirational Women in Law Awards, which we organized at the next 100 years. It's in our 6th edition, I think, in 2022. And she was awarded Solicitor of the Year last year. She also set up a race diversity group at the firms in Manchester, and this has grown since into becoming a national race diversity group, which she co-leads. She has a series called Let's Talk About Race, which created a safe environment for colleagues to talk about race issues and drive change across the business. So let's hear Leena's story next.
So we have some brilliant lawyers in the profession, but we need to ensure that all law firms are working cohesively to promote diversity within that profession, so that society is best served. So I've been with Irwin Mitchell for 16 years now. I trained with the firm, and I've had the opportunity to work across a few of our different offices, and I'm currently based in London, and I specialise exclusively in medical negligence law, representing patients, and I have my own team. At At Irwin Mitchell, I am co-chair of our Race Diversity Network, I Am Respect, and I also sit on our Diversity and Inclusion Board. So I've been involved with I Am Respect for many years, pretty much since I joined as a trainee solicitor at the firm, because it's something that I felt very, very strongly and passionately about. We're working on policies to promote both diversity and inclusivity, so not just promoting improving representation of minority ethnic colleagues in the firm, but also ensuring that we're best supporting the ones that we do have at our firm, and that we have a culture that is fully inclusive. Anyone aspiring to be a lawyer has got to have real drive and passion. The law is such a competitive field. So you've got to really want to make sure that it is for you. It's a given that law requires a level of intelligence, a level of academics, but actually I think more than that, an individual's got to be incredibly hardworking in order to not only progress through their career, but also to deliver to clients. I mean, for most lawyers working in whatever sector, a lot of law is a distressed purchase. So you're supporting people that have been through a difficult time. So that needs a lot of time, commitment, and dedication. Have an early think about exactly why you want to be a lawyer, why a legal career is something you're interested in, just so you can test that strength of motivation and also get a good idea about what type of law you might be interested in. I would also say it's important to be incredibly open-minded and not to have a fixed mindset about the type of law you want to practice. Of course, we all have our interests and we're pulled in a certain direction, but it's always good to have an open mind, because by way of example, early on I always had it in my mind that I wanted to be an intellectual property lawyer, and here I am as a medical negligence litigation lawyer, and I'm here and I thoroughly enjoy what I do, and that's because I kept a very open mind and was happy to try different things. I would say that one sort of key area that we really need to work on as lawyers is diversity and inclusion. We need to ensure that the profession reflects the society that it serves. Another thing that I would say is that following the pandemic, what's become very apparent is the need to be agile and adaptable. What's brilliant is we've realised that we've all been able to continue working whilst also serving our clients with no compromise whatsoever to the standard of legal care and service that they receive. Aspiring lawyers need to be mindful that we are sort of, I think, going through somewhat of a technological revolution at the moment. We've all embraced technology and digitization. Pandemic's really forced us to look at different ways of working, and I think we are now going to be looking to work in a completely different world to where we were just 2-3 years ago. This picture of my parents was taken in the 70s, shortly after they got married. And both of my parents are of Indian descent, but they're from East Africa. My parents' background, my family's background has played a really, really big part in my work ethic, my drive, and essentially where I've reached today. Both of my parents were my mum is incredibly hardworking and committed, but they didn't have the opportunity to attend university. And me and my siblings were the first generation to attend university in my family. The second picture I've got here is a picture of my graduation, and I've got some really fond memories of my university days and the time that I spent in Sheffield. And interestingly, it was during university that I did a specific module called Lawyers, Clients and Cases, and as part of that I had the opportunity to do a 3-day work placement at Irwin Mitchell as a 19-year-old in medical negligence. Little did I know then that I would actually end up working there 5 years later. and would still be here, you know, 20 years later. And then the final picture that I've got looks like a school photograph or a college photograph, but actually it's a photograph that was taken when I started my training contract at Irwin Mitchell. So the colleagues and the individuals you can see in this picture were my fellow trainees when I started at the firm back in 2006. Really great memories of my training contract at Irwin Mitchell and all the colleagues that you can see in this picture, who have all gone on to become wonderful lawyers. A lot of them are all around the four corners of the globe, and many of us still stay in touch to this day.
I'm delighted that Leena is able to join us tonight.
Hi, Dana.
Welcome to our event. And I wanted to ask you a few questions just to bring your film to life a little bit more. I'm getting a bit of an echo. I don't really know why. Hopefully it can be, it's quieter suddenly. As you know, we have created these films in a series. So one of our previous guests mentioned a little bit of advice for the current generation coming in, and how important it was to be yourself. And obviously it's great, but when you feel you're slightly different from the rest, you know, it's also a very difficult thing to do. So I was wondering whether you could share with our, you know, guests tonight, what advice you have and how you found this self-courage that she talked about, especially at a young age, to stay in for 16 years plus.
Thanks, Dana. Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think, firstly, if we put aside protected characteristics, society is essentially made up of the full spectrum of different personalities and characters. And that's what essentially makes our world so rich. And wouldn't it be a mundane world if we were all exactly the same? And I think that creativity and diversity of thought is hindered if essentially companies employ people that are all exactly the same or very similar. And I think the great thing about having different characters and different personalities in any workplace is that this essentially creates diversity of thought. Different people bring different ideas, different perspectives based on their own individual lived experiences, essentially. And I think that diversity of thought isn't that something which is just nice to have. I think it's an absolute imperative if any business or organization is to be successful. So I think what that means is when we say to aspiring lawyers, be yourself, that is a statement that's made with genuine intent. All businesses and law firms want a mixture of personalities, characteristics, and skill sets. And, you know, as far as I see it, we should all be ourselves at all times, because to do so otherwise would mean that we're not being true to ourselves. And ultimately, if you work anywhere where you feel you can't bring your authentic self to your workplace, you're not going to be very happy. Now, so I think that's something that applies to all of us, but there are further challenges that people from underrepresented communities face, you know, and whether that may be because they're from a specific race or, you know, they may have a disability, whatever it might be. What we do know is that these individuals sometimes find it harder to be authentic, as they're often, you know, a minority in their workplace. And it does take further courage for these individuals to be themselves, because many feel a compelling requirement to fit in. So a couple of years ago at Irwin Mitchell, we carried out an initiative called Let's Talk About Race. And we spoke to a number of people in our business about their experiences with race. And one sort of key thing that came out of that is that a lot of minority ethnic colleagues, using that as an example here, said to us that they were sometimes conscious in certain events or seminars or meetings that they might be the only person of colour, and they acknowledge that sometimes that might lead them to be more self-conscious, which creates an almost subconscious desire to blend in and behave in a way that conforms with the majority. So that could be to do with the way people socialise or topics of conversation, for example, that they can't quite relate to. So I completely acknowledge that there are further challenges, but what I would say is that, you know, absolutely embrace your individuality. You know, being yourself is not something that, you know, should require self-courage, because absolutely it's not something to be afraid of. It's essentially what businesses want, law firms want, and it's something that you should embrace. There is one example that I'd like to share about authenticity, which is I'm Indian and I speak Gujarati. And when I started work as a trainee, you know, my parents both speak English and Gujarati, but we converse in Gujarati. And I would often, whenever I got a call from my mum or my dad, I'd pop into a quiet room just because I didn't want anybody to hear me speaking in that language. And I did that for a few years until I thought, why don't I just take that call at my desk? And I started to do that, and people would comment more out of interest to ask me, well, what language were you speaking there? Oh, wow, that's amazing. We didn't realize you were bilingual. But there was something which held me back. And, you know, it's just taking that courage and essentially, you know, taking that step and embracing your authenticity, you know, it led to me realizing that actually, you know, people were very interested and intrigued by that.
That's such a great example, actually, to give. So, and also it kind of ties very nicely to your own path into the profession. So you touched on your family, your being the first generation coming all the way to higher education. So when it comes to underrepresented groups, what advice would you give? I mean, let's keep it into kind of 3 bullet points. You know, what can they practically do? With kind of what advice and insights could you share with them to help them rise to the top of the profession based on your own experience?
Yeah, sure. So a couple of bullet points. I would say have confidence and conviction in your own abilities. You know, anecdotally, I've noted over the years through my diversity and inclusion work, and not just in my firm, but work that I've done with the Law Society, that imposter syndrome is rife in underrepresented communities, and I think it's probably due to a lack of role models. And I would say, you know, banish that imposter syndrome and recognize your worth and what you bring to the table. Now, I know there's a lot of discussion and debate about imposter syndrome, what it really means, but certainly my experience has been focusing just for one moment on race. Discussions that I've had with people, I think that there's a lot of I think a lot of people lack confidence just because they're working in an environment where there aren't many people that look like themselves. So yeah, I'd say have confidence and conviction in your own abilities. The other piece of advice would be persevere and don't be disheartened by the lack of diversity around you. You know, we're all here today to discuss underrepresented communities, and I think we all agree that there's a lot of work to do. But I would say that, in my view, I think we're living through a paradigm shift. I think the profession has made huge strides in relation to D&I compared to, say, 15 years ago when I first entered the profession. And the dial is shifting. Of course, there's absolutely a lot to still do, but I think that individuals from underrepresented communities will probably find that in some places they might be the only or one of few people from those groups in a particular organisation. And I would say to them that's something that they should absolutely be proud of, and you know, they should recognise that they're role models and that they're inspiring change in others.
And because you mentioned the kind of system, if you like, surrounding, obviously individual action is important, you know, battling through and making sure you stay in, very important. But what more can we do? What more can the profession do to make it easier for people to not just come in, but rise up?
Yeah, I think it's really important for law firms to engage with underrepresented communities. So make a real effort to reach out to those groups and let them know that you're approachable and that people from these groups can very much be employed at a law firm like yours. And I think reaching out and engaging sends a positive message from the outset. So that could be through things like ensuring you're present at law firms, in colleges and universities which have got high percentage of underrepresented groups, engaging in social mobility initiatives. For example, at Irwin Mitchell, we participate in the Prime initiative every year, which is engaging students very, very early on. The other sort of key piece of advice that I would give is that it's important for firms to place equal, if not sometimes more importance than inclusion. When we look at diversity and inclusion, the two do very much go hand in hand. So, look at your culture. And I don't just mean a company's ethos or culture that's written down on your intranet page or your website. I mean, taking a real hard look at the values and behaviours displayed by people that work in your organisation. Is the culture truly inclusive? Are you genuinely encouraging people to bring their authentic selves to work? What type of social events do you hold? Are they sort of inclusive for everybody in your workplace? Do you have listening groups and networks for underrepresented communities? And I think most importantly, are all the senior leaders in the business engaged with the firm's D&I strategy? Do you provide bespoke D&I training for your leaders in the same way that you provide other leadership training? So as I say, I think the two things go hand in hand, and it's really important to make sure that if you've got talented employees from underrepresented groups, they feel included in the firm, and that is as important as diversifying your workforce, because I think if you get that balance wrong, then you risk losing people from those groups.
Well, this is great. Thank you so much, and thank you for opening your story to sharing it to a wider, with a wider audience, because that's how role models are made. So, thank you for joining the project and for sharing your story. And we'll be seeing you at the end on part of our chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Dana.
So as a family practitioner, I represent a lot of individuals from the LGBTQ+ community, as well as the Spanish and Portuguese speaking communities in England and Wales. Recently, I have turned my hand to representing those who have disabilities, either neurological, sensory or mobility, due to the own challenges that I've faced in my life, and I feel that the work that I do contributes to diversity and equality, as well as raising awareness and profile of the needs for the bar to reflect those that it assists by way of the justice system. I'm a family and animal protection barrister at Goldsmith Chambers, and I was previously a solicitor. I've also been a legal journalist and interpreter, and was called to the bar in 2014. I'm a member both as a trustee and committee member of numerous associations, including Bringing Disability to the Bar, as well as All Bar, which raises awareness of the needs of practitioners and students wanting to come to the bar who have disabilities. I'm also a committee member for LAGLA, which is LGBTQ+ lawyers, and I've also been involved with the Association of Lawyers for Animal Welfare. I also do voluntary work for Gallup, which is one of the only LGBTQ+ charities that assists those of the community that have suffered or are living with domestic abuse or hate crime. So I think a pivotal moment in my career has been my diagnosis of Stargardt's disease, which is juvenile macular degeneration. The way I describe it to people is it's how older people lose their eyesight, but happening to younger people. I noticed that my eyesight was deteriorating quite quickly, and knowing that my brother was diagnosed with Stargardt some years ago, I was given my diagnosis at the beginning of 2021, which was, it's been pretty tough knowing that I'm losing my eyesight, but it's forced me to reevaluate both the way that I approach my practice as well as who I am as a practitioner. I realise that there's very few resources for barristers, or in fact legal practitioners who have disabilities, to get advice and assistance within the profession. So I reached out to a few barristers with disabilities, and I can only say that they have been phenomenal, and I'm immensely proud to now be part of a community and represent a community that's so diverse. So I think the qualities that both current lawyers and students looking to practice law need, I think determination goes without saying. The legal profession, a career in law is tough. It's really, really tough. So having a thick skin will take you a long way. I think as well a sense of integrity, as much as you will be representing individuals or businesses. I think having a sense of self and your worth and your value is essential as well, because the legal profession is known for we're completely overworked, and court listings are saturated, and everyone's always very, very busy. And I think having a sense of self-care and knowing your own value is essential. And resilience, I think, which ties in with determination. I think having resilience and knowing that there will be knockbacks is very, very important as well, because trying to get a training contract, trying to get a paralegal job, trying to get a pupillage is really, really tough. And I think that can really affect your self-esteem and knock your confidence, but just keep going, keep on going, and you will get there in the end. There's a photo of my mum who's Spanish, and it's actually her visa from the early 1970s. So this was before Spain joined the EU, and it's a stamp within her passport where it says alien. What struck me about it, first of all, was how proud she looked, how proudly Spanish she looks in this photo, as well as how proud she looks as a woman to have a visa. There's just something about that photo that just conveys real confidence from such a young woman. The next photo is a photo of me with my amazing, crazy, fantastic, fabulous friends when I won the Lynn Freeman Women in Law Awards in July last year. It shows how smiley, happy, supportive my friends are. We had such a good time, and I felt that winning that award was a representation of all of us. The last photo is a photo of my dad. I spent most of my summers as a kid on the coast of Spain with my mum's side of the family, and my dad worked really, really hard, and he would only be able to get maybe a few days off to come and see us. He was an engineer before he retired, and he taught me everything about cars and motorbikes, and although I'm a girl, he was always very eager to push me to get stuck in with what were traditionally male responsibilities. And it was great, I think, to have that juxtaposition between my mum, who's very feminine but also very fierce, and my dad, who's a real man's man, but at the same time encouraging me and pushing me forward to, and reminding me that I could do anything that I set my mind to. And I think this photo really shows that. I think that the legal profession lacks diversity. I think it lacks representation. I think it's very telling that there have been numerous reports published over the past few years as to the underrepresentation of ethnic minorities as practitioners, those with disabilities as practitioners, and those of the LGBTQ+ community as well as those from alternate routes to law and low-income backgrounds. I think that the legal profession is still very closed, and there's a lack of transparency, which in turn affects students coming forward and their sense of capability to be able to pursue a career in law. I think that has to change. But my understanding, and I feel that the work that I try and do and the associations I'm part of, we're working towards moving that forward and ensuring that the next generation, it's a much more diverse, there's a sense of equality and inclusivity as well. Amongst the bar and practitioners, because it has to reflect the clients that the justice system serves. And I would say that at this stage it simply doesn't. And in turn there's a detachment in understanding of what those that are trying to access justice need if their representatives simply don't understand those needs. And that desperately needs to change.
Hi, Christina.
Hi.
Welcome to the Q&A session.
Hi.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. I particularly love the alien stamp because I had one of those. You've just reminded me I need to go and find whether I looked proud or not.
Yeah, my mum said she was very angry in that photo and she was very upset, but at the same time that strength, I just think it really comes through. She gets a little bit embarrassed, but I thought it was a great photo for the sake of the video. It was fantastic, I think.
Oh, it's wonderful to hear so much color. And just to start us off, because we will again speak at the end of the session, I just wanted to ask you, as a rising female barrister, and what were the setbacks you encountered, and how did you overcome those? Because that's a question that we get asked a lot, and people feel almost too frightened to try. So I'm sure you had many a story, but if you could give us some examples on how you overcame them and how you managed to be the inspiration you are today, that would be great.
Yeah, I think there's really two stages or two major setbacks, I would say, when trying to get into the profession, and very recently. So I would say in terms of being able to break into the profession, as it were, I didn't go to Oxford or Cambridge. I was the first of my family to, and I'm still the only one in my family that has a degree or went to university. And that was, I felt that was a setback, and not knowing anyone within the legal profession. The bar is a very conservative, it still is a very traditional profession, and being able to really have the confidence to be able to network and understand that I deserve to be there, that was really tough, being from a low-income background. And I think you just need to believe in yourself. I think you need to bank on your own abilities and bank on your willpower to be able to really stick to it and have that determination. I mentioned in the video about resilience. The setbacks happens to all of us, but it's not about how many times you fall down. It's about the amount of times you get back up and dust yourself off. I'd say in terms of the setbacks, now I'm 10, 12 years in, I would say the setbacks for me have been obviously my diagnosis of Stargardt's and losing my eyesight. That has been a completely different level of challenge that I've encountered, but it's opened up a world to me that I'm very proud to be part of. And it's I feel that the people I've met along the way have just been, they are truly inspirations, and they too are practicing barristers, and it makes me very proud to be part of that diverse group.
Just as sitting that a little bit longer into this question, really, what else would you like to have known before you embarked on this professional career? Because very often, again, because it's quite small, the barrister side, there's fewer people in the profession, so I think the ratio is like 1 to 9 solicitors to barristers. So it's quite it's hard to come across the barristers to be able to ask them questions. So
exactly,
what kind of things you would like to have known before you even chose? I mean,
I think what I underestimated was that there are people that will help you. So there are role models, considering I knew no one in the profession, and I went to networking events when I was at uni, and was genuinely very intimidated and very overwhelmed. But all it takes is for one person to show you kindness, or one person to just say a kind word and kind of, you know, build you up, that it makes all the difference. And I underestimated that there would be people there that would do that. And I think that's reflective of how the profession, almost the facade or this guise around the bar, is that it is very intimidating, it's very hostile. And that's why I think it's so important to be part of projects where you mentor those that are coming up from law school, coming up from university, because that kindness was shown to me once I got the courage to go to networking events. That kindness was shown to me, and paying that back, I think, is essential. So I underestimated that there would be kindness there, and that people would guide me, and there'd be mentoring opportunities. And I feel that I pay that forward, and I pay that back because people did it for me. So I feel it's only fair to pay that back to the next generation.
That, you're absolutely right, because one of the reasons I started the first 100 years through storytelling was to humanize the profession.
Absolutely.
Because I had this impression there was a disconnect between how people perceive, you know, obviously it's very kind of adversarial, so it is the way it works in practice, but actually too many people think of barristers and, you know, the profession being very hard to get into, but also people won't be welcoming approaches. But actually people are very friendly, as I say. It's great advice. And you mentioned a little bit about how you pay it forward, so yes. And how important it is actually to get involved in initiatives. Can you tell us more about what you do in that regard?
Well, I think role models are really the most powerful way of educating people, aren't they? I think because you then reach out to people just by virtue of telling your story, and there being dialogue that's being prompted and conversation about topics that people may not want to discuss. They may not want to speak about their fears because they come from certain backgrounds, low-income backgrounds, that they have disabilities they feel that would challenge them in getting to where they want to be in their career. So I think that role models are the most powerful way of educating people. And I'm involved in, I was always involved in the LGBTQ+ lawyers in LAGLA, doing work with Gallup. I've also been involved with, I do work with Advocates for Animals as well, and Latin America House, and Latin America Women's Aid. And I also, obviously now with my diagnosis, I am now part of the committees for All Bar, the Association of Disabled Lawyers, and Bringing Disability to the Bar. And I'm part of most of their mentoring schemes as well, if time allows. I'm part of their mentoring schemes, which I think is essential, because it's, as I said, it's paying that kindness forward. And all it really takes is for someone to believe in you, where there's been setbacks at every stage, and just to tell you, listen, there's someone cheering you on, or even opening, having open and honest conversation, and knowing that it's a safe place to have these conversations about your fears and about your concerns. I think that's what mentoring is all about. So yes, that's what I'm just trying to think if there are any other associations that I'm part of, but that's I think I've mentioned all of them.
Well, thank you for also being part of our own project. So we really appreciate it, and thank you for joining us tonight. And we will be chatting some more towards the end of the evening. So much. Thank you. And now to our third film of the evening.
What I love is that over the years I have seen many women who I started out mentoring, and they're achieving so much in their careers, and it just makes me incredibly proud. I see myself as an advocate for change. My specialist area is immigration, predominantly business immigration. I have been in practice for around 22 years. I originally started out doing asylum. I was very passionate about representing people at the tribunals. There were so many stories of injustice, and again, when I started out, you didn't have the accreditation system that you have now at the Law Society. So unfortunately, there were many immigration practitioners who purported to be know what they was doing, but back then they didn't really. And so it was an area that, and continues to be one that I was incredibly passionate about, and I wanted to make sure that people were being properly represented. In my sort of teenage years, I think, when I was probably about 11 or 12 years old, that I wanted to be a lawyer. I remember growing up and living in Peckham. At that time, there were, my elder sister, she would often get attacked, and it was purely because she was black. My granddad got attacked by some National Front supporters, and it was just all horrible. It was just horrible. And then with the riots were truly based on the fact that as black people living in this country, all that used to happen was you were always stopped. You were always stopped for no reason by the police. And it was just such a daily occurrence. So growing up with so much injustice, I thought to myself, the only way I can do anything about this is becoming a lawyer. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to really try, because otherwise, if I don't get in the system, then I'm not going to be able to help anyone. I'm just simply not. I would just be watching the TV, watching the news, and seeing so much damage being done to black people in that community in South London, because it was just constant. And I think the pivotal moment for me was literally with the Brixton riots, and I think that was absolutely the moment when I thought to myself, as much as I didn't think I was particularly bright or overly intelligent, I thought, you know what, this is the only way I can help, to be honest. I have to fight the system from within. What I'd like to see emphasised by future generations is really, I guess, the obvious one, right? Which is diversity. And I know that probably might sound like a bit of a cop-out, right? But we're now in 2022, and there are not enough people of colour in the profession, right? So I know that statistically there are more women, I believe, but diversity, and I will say that until I can see real change. And I do think diversity will benefit the legal profession. I did an internship in the US and worked for an organisation called the South Carolina Public Defender's Office. And at that time, there were disproportionately an amount of black men, predominantly, who had been put on death row and been wrongly convicted. So at the time, I was very passionate about that. And so I got an internship to work, like I say, in South Carolina. And during that time, we also went on death row and took instructions from the clients who were on there. So that's a time that was just really important to me. And I even still at home have these coasters that one of the guys on death row made for me. And so that was a very important time for me, and that's why I share that photo. So the second photo is of my old lecturer, and he is called Peter Hodgkinson. His photo is very important to me because as an individual, I think he was someone who was just really influential with my career. I went to the University of Westminster, but at the time I didn't have all the appropriate grades to get in onto the law degree. He was the reason why I was able to do the law degree at Westminster. I didn't qualify for like I say, for the actual entrance qualifications, but after speaking to him and convincing him that I should be on the law degree, he accepted me. And throughout the time when I was doing my law degree at Westminster, he was just a very important person to me and was just really special because he was very encouraging and he was incredibly supportive. The third photo, which was really important to me, was this was taken again probably in my mid-20s when I was in Brussels. I went to visit the European Parliament because at that time it was sort of piquing my interest into immigration and all of the different parts, if you like. So European law is, like, at the time, was a huge part of immigration. And I remember having a visit to the European Parliament, and I just thought it was absolutely incredible at the time. And I believe that I just really wanted to be involved, to understand the mechanics between European law and UK law. I think the next generation, they have so much resources at their fingertips. When I was coming in the profession, there wasn't mobile phones, there wasn't social media, there wasn't all this access to stuff. If I wanted to reach out to anyone influential or somebody and just speak to them, I'd have to kind of go to the library or write them a letter. Be adaptable to the situations that you're in, but don't compromise who you are at your core. I believe in being authentic.
I'd like to welcome Marcia now to the stage to have a chat about her career. It's so good to hear more about your story. I feel like I know you, but I heard some new things about you, which is great. And I wanted to start a little bit in our quick fireside chat. You talked a little bit about the social changes around you that forced you, if you like, down the path of studying law. Do you have any examples of your own professional life in which you felt you played down the differences to not hold yourself back at work?
Hi, Diana. Thank you so much for this opportunity, really. I was really overwhelmed when I was asked to do it, so I am grateful. So thank you very much. I wanted to say that first. When I was thinking about, doing this, I thought, is there any time when I've had to play down who I am or been in a situation? It doesn't happen anymore now, but I absolutely remember years ago when I would go to conferences or black tie events, which were, for legal awards or a legal conference, and I would walk into those events and I'd scan the room thinking, oh, please let there be another brown person or somebody there, right? There never was, really, right? There never was. And so I'd go into that and I'd think, and I'd get so nervous and anxious to think, oh, there's nobody around who looks like me. Who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to talk to? Like, what's going to happen? And it used to just make me really anxious. But then, like I say, it doesn't happen today. Today, I walk in to anywhere, and if there's no other person of colour, I actually don't, I'm disappointed. But then I think, well, okay, I'm going to do whatever I can to try and encourage people to have more people of colour. So if I go to a conference and there's a panel or something like that, I'll kind of say, oh, okay, so why is there no people, like, why isn't there somebody of colour here, or why isn't there a woman here? Why am I, like, just because I'm interested in it, because that can't be right. It's impossible that I'm the only person in the immigration world. Do you know what I mean? Which is often the case, but that's I challenge it more. Whereas when I was much younger, I wouldn't have done it. I wasn't brave enough to do it. And that's the truth. I really wasn't. I would just suck it up and just go, okay, hello, my name's Marcia to people. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It does, but I still would love to hear a little bit more about how you found the strength to make this transition from the moment of if you like, more passive participation to actually taking a more active role in calling things that you didn't feel were right out, and being more activist actually in terms of making sure there is more diversity around you. Where did you feel the tipping point happen, and also where did you find the strength to just move from one stage to the other?
Yeah, I think for me, it was the people who were around me. So wherever I worked over the years, and it sounds like I had this privilege, but it meant it was important to me where I was going to work and who I was going to work with and who I was going to work for. It took me years to kind of be able to be in a position to have that choice. But each place that I worked, I thought, right, okay, can I be me? I have to be me. I have to be authentic. I have to be just who I am, because, and I'm slightly echoing Leena to some point, but I can't be anybody else. It's just impossible for me to be that person. Like I said in my video, I always felt that I wasn't particularly bright, or I wasn't particularly posh. And so I wasn't going to try and create those types of situations for myself to pretend to be somebody else. So I actually think the tipping point is embracing your difference. I think being different is beautiful because everybody is different. And once we recognize that and we accept that, then I think it's the thing that just helps you, you know, progress and excel. I absolutely 100% embrace my culture. Look at me, I'm a black woman, right? So, and my parentage is Jamaican, love it. I was born in East London, love it. All of it makes me different, but I embrace it and I'm very proud of it. So kind of any opportunity that comes along, I'm going to tell people who I am, if they don't already know, and try and encourage other people to be authentic and embrace their difference. Dana, have I answered the question, or did I just...
No, you are answering the questions. Of course you are. There's no test. I'm not marking anything.
No, yeah.
It is a really lovely chat. So I have one last question, and then we will move into the panel and hand the chairmanship to Alison. Really, what advice would you like to give to law firms, yours and beyond yours, to encourage more gender equality, more diversity across the board, and actually more people to progress to the very top, to the best of their ability, and to feel they thrive?
So I think, right, don't just do mission statements on your website. Don't just chat stuff and say, oh, this is great, this is what we're doing. I think you've got to really do the practical stuff, right? So at Kingsley Napley, I'm going to get the figure wrong, but I know that we're at least 60% women, we're at least 60% female. We have a very strong ethos in the firm, and everyone has got to know our values, and that's right across the board, and that's huge for us. And even I was the first black partner, I always say this, but I was the first black partner at Kingsley Napley, and that was like nearly 9 years ago, right? Now, since that time, what Kingsley Napley have done is they've said, actually, we need to change this. We need to be more active in this arena and try and truly attract more people of colour. So we, like most organisations, we have a D&I group, but we changed that name, I think it was last year, because we wanted to make sure that we was inclusive with everyone, who, even people with disabilities, you know, different social backgrounds, obviously race, ethnicity, cultural heritage. We wanted to take the whole thing and say, we want to actively recognise and promote change, and that is what we do. So just really quickly, we've donated to the Black interns, right? So we've committed to that for 5 years. We'll give 2 paid internships. We do book clubs. We do so much stuff because we're trying to be very active. And we've not just been doing it yesterday. We've been doing it for the last, like I said, I've been there for 8.5 years. I think it was happening before I came, but when I came, it was more of a, and it's not down to me, trust me, because we've got some fabulous people in the organisation who do so much, but it was trying to encourage the firm to be really active and practical as well in our approach. So we're doing loads of things, and that's what I think all law firms need to do. And then one last thing, which is I'm kind of passionate about, is the you've obviously got the gender pay gap, but you also have a race pay gap. How is it possible? But I'm a black woman, and if I found out that in my organisation, somebody who was at my level, exactly the same as me, but just happens to be white, is going to be paid more than me, I'd be horrified. So it's those kind of things that law firms and all firms need to make an active change and pay everyone the same. Hopefully I have answered it.
What a great topic to end on. So thank you so much for sharing your story, your photographs, your experience with us, and for being part of the Next 100 Years series. It's really great to have you with us tonight. And I would like us to now move on to the second part of the evening, which will involve a panel chat chaired by Alison.
Thank you. That was fabulous. So we're going to move on to talk about role models, the importance of role models. And role modeling is what this is really about, isn't it? This is about being visible, it's about inspiring, it's about motivating. And Christina said role models are the most powerful way of educating people. And she talked about the importance of sharing stories, and that's what this is all about. So so we're going to talk about role models, and I think I'm going to start by asking you all, and I might start with you, Donna, actually, what you think the top qualities are for a role model. So perhaps everybody could just choose one thing. So Donna, what is it for you?
Not an easy question, can I say?
I didn't think you'd find that one hard, Donna.
Well, I think, because I think being willing to accept being a role model is the starting position. Very often you can be reluctant. You can almost fight being one. And I think people, as we've heard, need role models. They need to identify with what is possible, and they create aspirations. So accepting being one, I would say, is the first step.
Yeah, because it's a big responsibility, isn't it? I think that sometimes, you know, we forget the impact of what we say and what we do. So yeah, I agree with you, actually. I think it is. And sometimes that feels like quite a big task. Right, I'm going to ask everybody quickly for their one word on this. So I'm going to go to Marcia next.
Oh, thanks, Alison. I feel like I'm going to be repeating myself, but I think in order to be a role model, you've got to be authentic, because if someone can't identify with me because I'm acting in a different kind of way and things like that, then yeah, to me it doesn't work. I think authenticity and be approachable.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things, I suppose, that's related to being authentic, being true to yourself, is being relatable. So, you know, I think sometimes, I think a danger is that people can try to make it look easy, and actually, I don't think that's very helpful. And I sometimes think we ought to have honest conversations about how hard some things are. You know, I mean, I think post-pandemic, you know, well, during the pandemic rather, you know, when everybody was working flexibly, that made it easier in a lot of ways to, you know, to balance family commitments with work commitments. But generally, it isn't that easy to do. And so I think it's, as you say, I think that's part of being authentic, you know, being honest about it. And I think it was Leena who was saying, you know, how hard a lot of it's about hard work. You know, you're not going to succeed as a lawyer without hard work. I mean, obviously you need talent, you need luck, everything else, but you also need to be prepared to work hard, and there's not much point in pretending otherwise. Okay, Christina.
I think honesty, because the way that I see being a mentor is that you're offering guidance, aren't you? So you're drawing from your own experience to assist someone who is yet to get to where they want to be. So I'm often asked about feedback on CVs, feedback, mock interviews, pupillage applications. And I think being honest about where my mentee can advance the chances of them getting that second interview or getting that mini pupillage, etc. I think having that honesty, I think that really is the foundation of a mentee-mentor dynamic. So honesty, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it is really important that people give feedback that is meaningful to people.
Yes.
That's actually going to help them. And it may be that actually, you know, the bar is really, really hard to break into. And I think that, you know, you would never want to dampen anybody's enthusiasm, but it may just be that they're going to really struggle. And I think it's important to have those conversations and also to find other ways in, to find other routes. But, you know,
offer ideas. To offer ideas and offer suggestions, and there may be programs or suggestions I can make that would actually strengthen their chances of getting that interview or getting whatever it is that they want to achieve. It may be that the advice I give them or the guidance I give them might assist them in just getting that additional point, so they're just into the second round interview, and that's what mentoring is all about.
Yeah, exactly. Right, okay, Leena, I think you're the last one on this.
Thanks, Alison. Just picking up on points that you've all made, I just want to start by saying I think you can be both an active and a passive role model. I don't think being a passive role model is a bad thing. And what I mean by that is, as we've all alluded to, I think being an active role model requires time, commitment, whether you're a mentor or whether you're participating in panel discussions or writing articles. I think if you're a female leader from an underrepresented community, but you haven't got the time to do all of those things, it doesn't matter, because you're still a role model just due to your sheer presence. And I think it's important to make that distinction, because for various reasons not everybody can provide take on additional commitments. But I think in terms of active role models, I think a key skill attribute would be someone who's invested. I think you've got to be a person who's interested and committed to supporting the next generation of lawyers. And I think that takes a certain skill set, as not only do you need to develop and cultivate talent, I think you need to be someone who can provide encouragement and support beyond that. So someone who's willing to share their own experiences, challenges, insights and learnings.
Thank you. We've talked a bit about mentoring, and I wanted to ask how important you think mentoring and indeed reverse mentoring is. I don't know whether any of your organisations have a reverse mentoring scheme or even have a mentoring scheme. You talked a bit about this, Christina. I don't know if you want to say any more about mentoring at the bar.
So I'm at Goldsmith Chambers, and we do have a mini pupillage scheme, which is a form of mentoring. And I think it works both ways. It allows mentees to get an insight at what takes place at the bar, as well as get a feel for Chambers itself. So it may be they're refining their pupillage applications and just want to get a feel for whether or not Chambers will be a fit for them. And at the same time, it gives us an idea of whether or not they're a candidate that we would be interested in to take on for pupillage. So I think it works, it's mutually beneficial. But yeah, we have a mini pupillage scheme in Chambers, but I know a lot of us also do mentoring outside of Chambers. So that may be through our Inns of Court, or it may be through social or community networks and projects. But yeah, there's plenty of opportunities to offer your skills to mentor someone. But I also believe that you're never too far into your career to look upwards and look at those more senior to you and see whether or not there's a mentoring scheme for yourself. So I'm part of judicial mentoring schemes, and I'm mentored by female judges, and I look to senior members of chambers as well, who really laid the foundation for me being able to practice as a woman from a low-income background. And I also look to the barristers, the very few barristers that are disabled and at the bar. So you can share your experiences as well as ask for guidance from those that came before us. And I think that is equally as important. You're never too far into your career to seek guidance and want to better or hone your skills as well, or seek advice.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I also think that if, there is always something to be gained from the mentoring relationship. So if you're the mentor, you will say you're a mentor of somebody who is actually a lot more junior, but you will still, just hearing how people from a much younger generation, how they think, how they feel, what their aspirations are. I think that, that actually there is always a positive in the mentoring relationship. Do any of you well, of course I know about Irwin Mitchell, but I think Marcia, do you have a mentoring or reverse mentoring scheme at Kingsley Napley?
We are building one. We don't have a formal one at Kingsley Napley, but I've mentored people, I think probably for the last 15 years, and some of it was quite organic. So it's a bit like, what I said in my video is that, I've definitely been mentoring people for years and years and years. And when we think about mentoring up, honestly, I think that's one of the things that should be definitely promoted, because, and forgive me when I say this, but I'm a very mature woman. So it's often, I have to go to my team and say to people, okay, what do things look like in this world? Like I said, again in my video, there wasn't even internet when I started practicing and all that kind of stuff. There wasn't social media, there wasn't all of these things. So I have to learn from, I'll say the younger generation, but a different generation. So I'm always open to listening to what they're telling me and how things are. And so I look at that as me being mentored by the junior people in my team, because they're teaching me so much. And they would honestly, they'd say, yeah, we do. But at the same time, I try to give as much time as I can to mentoring a few people. But I'm also very conscious of, I think I have 3 mentees at the moment, and unfortunately I can't take any more, because if I'm going to do it, I want to do it properly and I want to do it thoroughly. So yeah.
One of the things that I experience is peer-to-peer mentoring, actually. I mean, in a way, the cohorts of trainees when I started, in my law firm was a form of peer-to-peer, mentoring. But definitely in my business life, getting a sense of where you are in your entrepreneurial journey and understanding what is, the benchmark, what is expected, and being able to speak to people at your level and get a sense of where you are. I found that really helpful, and having honest conversations with them. And both with the Next 100 Years and my business, we have created a women leaders group called Women Who Will. Every year we, select about 22 people, and we have, Chatham House rules conversations every quarter, where it's very much about a safe space for them, but there are similar levels of leadership, and they talk very openly about, how they're finding, what they're trying to achieve. We celebrate when one of them gets to be GC or becomes a partner or something like that. So we kind of, because we bolster each other as a group, I find that's really effective. And there's less competition, so it's really about mentoring and support and celebration rather than anything else. And I found that's really helpful.
And that's huge, isn't it? That's huge, and that's really important. I will be quiet in about 2 seconds, but that's absolutely amazing, because what I've seen is, obviously I'm based in London, so London doesn't have that, in my opinion, enough of a network of people at this level who, like you say, Chatham House, you can just talk freely and feel that you're talking in a safe space. Up north, they have loads of different groups and all that kind of thing, and we just don't have enough here. So I actively try to ask for help with people who are super senior and just say, can I have a chat? Can I talk about what's going on? And I try to do it so it's outside of my firm, because I just think it feels easier to do that than within my firm. But I'm going to be quiet now because I'm talking too much. Leena, over to you.
So at Irwin Mitchell, we do have a traditional mentoring scheme, but one thing that the diversity networks have recently launched is reciprocal mentoring. So it is taking the concept of reverse mentoring, but we've relabeled it reciprocal mentoring. And essentially that's turning the traditional mentoring model on its head. And rather than having a mentor imparting their knowledge, experience, insight to a more junior mentee, the relationship and reciprocal mentoring is evenly balanced. I think, but perhaps not dissimilar to what Dana was talking about in terms of peer-to-peer, except in this situation, you might still have a more senior colleague with a more junior colleague, but the relationship very much is about equal understanding and committing to learn more about each other, not just about sort of your professional accomplishments, but also about challenges that you faced. So specific to the network that I co-chair, I Am Respect, which is a race diversity network, we partnered colleagues at Irwin Mitchell from minority ethnic backgrounds with Caucasian colleagues. Now, it is very much a pilot. We launched it in May, so we haven't, I think we're due to review it at the 6-month point. So we'll be welcoming feedback, and we don't profess to say that this is a solution or an answer, but it's something that actually our colleagues asked for during the course of the race. Let's talk about race sessions that I talked about. People wanted to have this kind of mentoring opportunity with leaders in the business. So yeah, it's very much let's wait and see, and if it's work and we get great feedback, we'll continue it.
I think, Christina mentioned people being kind and wanting to, a lot of people really want to help develop junior lawyers within their practice, or people coming into the bar, people from backgrounds where they don't have any contacts, they haven't been able to do work experience, and then when you've benefited from that, like Christina said, then you want to be able to pay forward with that. So I think part of it is about reaching out and saying you'd like a chat, and generally I think people will respond positively to that. So I think I would encourage people to just, maybe not a formal mentoring relationship, but just having a chat.
One thing, Alison, if I may, Alison, I just wanted to make one point which I think is really important. I think we all of us feel strongly about giving back and supporting others, but one thing that I've become very aware of over the last couple of years is essentially, I think sometimes there can be more of a demand on unrepresented leaders and colleagues to, for example, mentor or give back. And I think we've just got to be really mindful of that, because I think many of us feel a sense of obligation to help others and influence and inspire others. But equally, I think we've got to be mindful that sometimes, I think I read a really interesting article where it was referred to as a taxation on underrepresented colleagues. So I think mentoring is brilliant, but I think we've also got to be mindful of making sure that that balance is there and not necessarily having that expectation.
Yeah, I think it's a point really well made, Leena. I wanted to ask Christina a question because we talk about disability a lot less than race and sexuality, I think, as well. So Christina, do you want to talk to us about is it the Disability Task Force?
Yes.
Yeah, do you want to talk to us a bit about that?
Yeah, so in my own experience as someone who was born able-bodied and has become disabled whilst already being at the bar, I noticed there was a distinct lack of support. And I'm sure that many disabled people, whether or not they were born with a disability or they were born able-bodied and then acquired a disability later in life, would probably agree that disability can be extremely isolating, both from a mental standpoint and a literal mobility physical standpoint. And when I originally got my diagnosis, I reached out to my IN, I reached out to the Bar Standards Board, to the Bar Council, and there was really nothing. There was a lot in terms of diversity, but not so much, not really to do with disability and the inclusion of disabled practitioners. So I actually reached out to disabled practitioners, and they echoed my sentiments that it was actually very lonely. And I've noticed a distinct, the pendulum really is swinging in the opposite direction, because in the last 18 months or 2 years, there's just been a flurry of movement. And I think generally speaking, outside of law, there's an awakening, I think, in the public consciousness as to the disabled community and what we're capable of achieving. That was seen in the Oscars at the beginning of this year, and in everyone's living rooms through Strictly Come Dancing as well. So I think there's an awakening in the public consciousness of the disabled community, but the Bar Council and the Bar Standards Board have really taken that on board. And the Bar Council has established a disability task force, which is due to launch next week, actually. And the likes of the Association of Disabled Lawyers and bringing disability to the bar and all bar, as well as BLEMI, which is the Barristers with Lived Experience of Mental Illness. They're doing phenomenal work, and they're doing really, really well. And there's a real interest there. What I've been taken aback by is that so many people are coming forward and telling me their stories, not just how disability affects them personally, but also how they are affected by family members with disabilities. So when I go to court, I'm assisted by my PA, and I wear a badge which indicates that I'm visually impaired. And but I don't have a guide dog or a cane. I'm not at a stage where I feel that I need that when I'm in court, as I'm able to navigate with the assistance of my PA. But I will be honest with judges, and I'll be honest with opposing counsel. And I've been really honoured to hear the stories of opposing counsel tell me about how they struggled with postpartum depression. They've struggled with a parent with dementia. They struggle with the challenges as a result of a child with autism. And all I've literally told them is, hello, I'm opposing counsel, I'm visually impaired, just to let you know this is my PA. And it's opened the floodgates. And I, as I said, I'm very honoured and that these people have confided in me with their stories, but I think that really, really shows that there is a distinct lack within the legal profession generally, because this is solicitors as well. Instructing solicitors are instructing me because I have a lived experience of disability, and they want to tell me their stories. So there isn't enough dialogue when it comes to disability. There isn't enough dialogue when it comes to accessing the justice system as a person with a disability. And from the most basic, how do you get into a court building if there are steps and you're a wheelchair user, to, in my case, for instance, I've been in court buildings where the light bulbs don't work. It's things like this. Or if you are someone who's accessing the justice system who is from a low-income background and doesn't have access to IT that would assist you with being able to access application forms, access bundles, it's things like this. And it's the most basic of human rights to be able to access the justice system. So I'll park it there, because I've got plenty to say when it comes to disability, but I do see that the tide is turning, and I think it's very exciting times, both within the legal profession and outside. Generally from a social standpoint, I think it's very exciting times.
Well, I mean, you're clearly really passionate about it. I would say passion is one of the top qualities of a role model, because I think it's infectious, and it's clearly, you know, and it is infectious. And I mean, I agree with you. I think the people sharing their stories, I mean, you know, you start talking and there will be people listening to this thinking, oh my God, that's amazing, you know, and they'll want to share their story. So, you know, and that's how role models are created. So, so thank you. Thank you for that. I wanted to ask how you think, I think we need more male role models, but, you know, more male allies, although I think, you know, we do have more men on board these days, but men as role models, perhaps working in a different way, you know, showing more interest in a healthy work-life balance. You know, I think the pandemic changed everybody, didn't it? You know, we all started talking about self-care, looking after ourselves before we look after others, and people who've never done yoga before, people like me getting into yoga, I mean, all that kind of stuff. And I think, you know, we started talking about well-being and being kind, and I think we need to bring men into that discussion, and certainly around work-life balance and working in a different way, because what we don't want is a model where men are still turning up at the office every day and it's the women who are at home dropping the kids off at school and collecting them. So I don't know if anybody's got any ideas about how we engage men in those conversations. I mean, hopefully there was some listening to this and thinking, yeah, I'm on board with that.
I think Alison, yeah, well, I would say I completely agree with you. And I know at Irwin Mitchell, obviously, we've got I Empowered, our gender diversity group. And I just think there's always been a misconception that if there's a gender group, it's for women. And I know at Irwin Mitchell, we've done well to get men engaged and attend our events, but we still want more to attend. But I think there's a general misconception around all aspects of diversity, which is, for example, when we come to look at race, it's not, our race network isn't just for our minority ethnic colleagues, it's for everyone, because it should be in everybody's interest to promote diversity at every level. And I think that misconception, and I know your question is about engaging men, but I think that question, essentially the challenge applies across the board. And you will know, Alison, that one thing me and my colleague Chani feel very strongly about is, from a race perspective, ensuring we've got white allies, because it's not about, ethnic minority colleagues, pushing for a certain cause or an agenda. It's for all of us to contribute to this. And at IM, we've done really, really well in that regard, and we've got great engagement. So that's my sort of general kind of response to what you're saying. I agree that it's a challenge, and I think that's because I think people like to compartmentalize networks, and unless they feel that they're a member of that particular underrepresented group, they don't seem to realize actually it's for everybody, really.
Well, I suppose that's I suppose another quality in a role model will be promoting commitment to communities, diversity and inclusion, and not a gender group, not a race group, but intersectionality, so that so it's diversity and inclusion in the broader sense. But I mean, I think it's easier said than done. But I think it's important to share intersectional stories, and of course there often is a lot of intersection. I know a lot of people. I'm from a low-income family. You can see I'm a woman. I'm white. I'm from a low-income family. You wouldn't know that. But so we all have our own stories to share. But I just think somehow we need to. Engaging everybody is a little bit of a challenge, but it's also fantastic. It's also fantastic when it works. I mean, we could go on. We've only got 5 minutes left, and I feel like we could go on all night because I have so many questions I'd like to ask. But I think because we're now pretty short of time, I'm just going to ask one, which you can all answer pretty quickly. So just tell me who your own role model is within the profession and why. So this is going to have to be really quick. So I'm going to start with Christina.
I'm actually going to mention two. One isn't the legal profession, and one is the US system, and she passed away last year. But Ruth Bader Ginsburg, for me, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. I think as a woman of an era where women's rights are very much secondary, I think we, even as practitioners in a different jurisdiction, have so much. We owe so much to her. And secondly, for me, outside of the legal profession, is Frida Kahlo, as a queer Latina who was also disabled and was colossally creative, and she's become a feminist icon. She, for me, embodies, I mean, I have a poster of her in my flat. I think she's absolutely fantastic, and the fact that she was very open about her suffering and how disability affected her, and she's a mixed Latina, that for me sold. The two.
Oh, I love both your fantastic examples.
Adore her. So those are my two.
Yeah, both brilliant examples. Right, Marcia.
Oh, I was so nervous he was going to ask this, because I don't actually, there's way too many. I can't, honestly, and this is like a cop-out, I cannot pick just one person. So I'm going to say exactly what Christina said, and I'm probably going to say exactly what Leena said, but that's it for me. I can't think of one person, so I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay, I'm going to come to Dana last. I'm going to come to you then, Leena.
Okay, so I mean, there are lots of amazing female role models like Irwin Mitchell, but the person I'm going to mention is essentially my first supervisor at IM, who doesn't work in the law anymore, a lady called Sue Tyson. I'm mentioning her because, you know, she was my first, as I say, supervisor when I qualified. She took me under her wing, and I think really sort of my progression in the firm is based on sort of the early support and encouragement she gave me. I talked earlier about imposter syndrome, which, you know, I've suffered from in a big way, but she was someone who has been a constant source of support even after she left the firm and left the law. She's, you know, maintained a connection and essentially a friendship with me. So that's the person I would mention.
Great. Dana.
Well, I am spoiled for choice, having met hundreds, I think, of the pioneering women in law, and I have to say I have made a mosaic of all of them. Some of them, like Rose Halbrand, obviously has passed away, and for me she was one of the early ones I discovered, and I love the way she juggled life and family and small kid and trying to be in lots of places, and talked about it publicly at a time when it wasn't really talked about, and honestly as well. She talked about her help at home. So I think that resonated because when I started the first 100 years, my daughter was about 3. And so, you know, I had her run me and I was thinking, would anything work anymore? And so that definitely inspired me to keep going. Later on, when I met Lady Hale and I worked with her on the Arts Commission, it was really inspiring, and you know, it's amazing to have spent so many hours with her. And then I met Lady Arden, and she was amazing because she has such a passion for justice and law, and so different. And then probably one of the most amazing women is Linda Dobbs. I love spending time with her. We have such wonderful, you know, a couple of hours every few months together, and it really is, she's so calm and so passionate but still calm, and amazing story and achievements. So really, and she loved the music and the piano, so that always brings it back home for me. And so I always say that a role model is not, I never saw it as one person. I close my eyes and I make a mosaic of so many people that I encounter that teach me at least one lesson in life that I always remember and carry with me.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you. Again, amazing examples. So we are going to have to wrap up, and I've enjoyed this evening so much. Thank you, everybody. I think what we've heard about a lot is the importance of being passionate, resilience, being confident, being authentic, being kind, getting involved in mentoring, embracing difference. So I want to thank, you know, our 3 fabulous panelists for their sharing their stories on video, Marcia, Leena, and Christina. And I want to really thank you, Dana, for allowing Irwin Mitchell to be a part of your amazing project celebrating women in law. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, and good night.
Let's see you at the next one.